Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Watershed Wednesday, Creating the Career You Want session. My name is Patricia Ezechie, and if it's your first time here, welcome. I am a career, resilience, and wellbeing executive coach, and I work with people to help them create the careers they want for lives where they thrive. So these are careers where you can be authentic and present, so you're showing up completely as who you are in all of your glory, using your best skills and strengths. So with a clear sense of purpose, but in a way that supports your health and your well-being, as well as your aspirations for success, because without one, we cannot have the other. In fact, without well-being, we can't have anything. So that's the premise of the work that I do and the work that we do in this space. Now, these sessions are called Watershed Wednesday sessions because they're on a Wednesday. And for me, that is the critical point in the week. It's the watershed of the week. It's the point in the week where if the week's been going great, there's still loads that we can do. If the week's not going quite the way we wanted, there's space to kind of turn things around. And if on occasion, which is increasingly rarer for me, on a Wednesday you're absolutely exhausted, there's time to swap things out and create more space for yourself so you're able to get to the end of the week and take the rest that you need if you can't create that space for rest right in the moment. But it's pregnant with possibilities Wednesdays, which is why we hold these sessions on this day. So welcome if you're new. So today's session is an add-on really, or a continuation of the conversation we started last week, which was based on getting promoted and this whole idea of being seen and being heard. Now, today I want to continue with that theme of being seen and being heard from the perspective of managing your mind and what the mind does and how the mind plays into this whole concept of us being more confident to be visible and vocal. So, and this really came as a result of some of the feedback I got and some of the great questions I got as a result of last week's session. So for those of you who are sending in questions and asking for extra coaching, which I'm happy to do here and by email, or sending in suggestions, thank you so much, because it makes this all really, really worthwhile. And the thing that came out of some of the comments from last week was this idea that I want to speak up, and I think the wording was, would my questions be valid? And I just, at the time when I responded, was this, and I was thinking, it's all this thing that we do in our heads about the critic and the judge and the saboteur who is stopping us from actually ever having a go at anything. And it's a really, really interesting thing that we all have countless thoughts. We have apparently tens of thousands of thoughts every day, but these thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts. And yet sometimes when these thoughts are coming up through these critics and through these judges and these voices in our heads, we take them as facts. That thought that says, don't say anything because you haven't got anything of consequence to say, it's not a fact, it's just a thought. It doesn't become anything until we attach energy to it and we act on it. And if you're attaching energy to it and feelings to it, so you get anxious and you're not speaking, then that thought has taken on something else apart from what it was originally, which is just a thought. So if we come back to this whole idea about being seen and being heard, the key to beginning to manage some of the voices in our heads, because they are voices, some of the people I've heard sometimes described that live in our heads, is to become really aware of them. Notice what the voices or the thoughts are saying. Notice how judging or harsh they might be. And if you can, be curious about where they've come from. And depending on when it's happening and what's happening, there are several things that we can do. We can notice, as I've said. Other times you can just turn it off. There's times when I say, shut that up, please. Turn off the crap channel. It's something that a teacher of mine once said. We learn to turn off the crap channel. I hear you, not helpful. But it's also interesting to remember that sometimes these voices have arisen because they're there to sometimes protect, to support, and they've helped us cope at some points. So even though they can be annoying and they can be debilitating and they can sometimes hold us back, I always advise you to be gentle and benign with them. With mine in particular, I say, I hear you, not helpful. I hear you, not true. That's so not true. Or actually, you know what? You're right, I'm going to do it anyway. They are a means to try and sometimes keep us safe, to stop us from feeling exposed, and to stop us sometimes if we're in situations that are unfamiliar to us. So one of the things that might be stopping you from speaking up and being heard in meetings is that inner critic. So I invite you the next time that you hear that inner critic and you hear that voice saying to you, don't say that, no one's going to find that interesting. Just say, thanks for the feedback in your head, and say it anyway. And see what happens. Remember, the thought is just a thought. It's not a fact. We have thousands of those thoughts today. And I'm telling you, if they were all true, none of us would be here. So remember that a thought is just a thought. It's not a fact. So you can choose to listen to it and hold on and do what it says. You can choose to see it, let it pass through, and still do what you need to do. It's important to add that sometimes thoughts can trigger feelings in us. So you can have that thought and it can develop as anxiety in you or fear in you. So what you can do in that situation is sometimes think that thought's unhelpful. I want to feel confident. What do I need to think to feel confident? And maybe see if you can think something else that will enable you to say what you've got to say. Other times in the moment, it's just good to acknowledge the thought and then feel the fear and do it anyway. So if we come back to managing the mind, think about, we've said thoughts are just thoughts, they're not facts. You're going to get tens of thousands of those coming through your mind, especially in situations where you feel something's a little bit unsure, in meetings a bit fearful, all kinds of things will run through your mind. It's just a thought, it's not a fact. Speak and say what you've got to say and see what happens. Other things I think it'd be worthy of you thinking about, what's worthwhile thinking about is that, beginning to believe that you have value, that what you have to say has value, that what you have to say is a unique perspective or not a unique perspective. As I said last week, that could be transformational. It could be the missing link to something that we're talking about. It could be another perspective on something that we're talking about. In one of the comments that I got, the person was concerned that they were new and that everybody already knew what they were going to ask. And I was thinking, do they? I've been in enough meetings and enough workshops to know that sometimes when we've been on a project for so long, we become so far removed from what the actual initial objectives were that sometimes somebody bringing in what appears to be a simple question is the thing that makes us all think, crikey, all right, we're off-piste here, we're supposed to be here. So again, coming back to the main point is believe that you have value. Believe that what you have to say is of value. After all, why would it be any less of value than anybody else? And we will talk more and more about developing confidence and self-belief as we continue these sessions and we continue to work together. So that's something else that you can do. The third thing that you can begin to do is to recognize, actually, as I said last week, there's no such thing as getting it wrong. You might say something and it doesn't land. It doesn't land. It just didn't land. Or you said something, someone disagrees. It doesn't mean that you're any less than or any different. It's just that that particular comment or that particular piece of feedback was interesting, but didn't quite have the resonance that perhaps you were hoping it would have, or other people thought it might have in that situation. Something else is think positively of the impacts that you have on other people. This links very closely with that whole believing in yourself. Why wouldn't my impact on you be positive? I'm coming into this meeting with positivity. So what I'm going to share and say to you is coming from a positive space. So why am I thinking in my mind anything contrary to that? So always think positively about the impact you're having on others, because more often than not, most of us are going into all these situations want to do the very best by ourselves and by the people around us. I'm just looking at my notes because my brain is a bit flippy today. So yeah, and I think that's more or less everything I wanted to say. Believe you have value, think about positively about your impact, learn from the experience. The big one is the voices. Become a friend to your inner critic. Understand your inner self-saboteur. When a particular voice turns up, and it's just the one that wants to undermine, 9 out of 10 times, it's not doing it from a malign space. It's doing because it wants to protect you. Our human brain is so complex, but in some respects, it's so simple because we are triggered by the thought of speaking in a meeting, as much as we are triggered by the thought of running away from being eaten alive by a saber-toothed tiger, we are so simple in some respects and yet so complex. So the response that we're triggering in our bodies sometimes are far in excess of the situation that we're currently in. So sometimes when your brain is throwing up these thoughts and throwing up these things to try and protect you, it's coming from a good place, but it's coming from a brain and a chemistry in our body that is millennia old and hasn't actually caught up with the world that we're currently living. You're not going to die if you say the wrong thing in a meeting. You know, it really is okay for you to speak up. It really is okay. And the only way for you to get better at it is to keep doing it. So the next time that you're in a situation, we talked last week about some of the things that you can do to prepare. The next time you're in a situation where you need to find your voice, you need to be heard, you need to be seen, be aware. Awareness is the key to everything. If those voices are there saying, oh, Patricia, nobody wants to hear what you've got to say today, you think, oh, that's interesting, but I'm going to say it anyway, because you might be wrong. And it's just a thought. And be curious as to when these thoughts or these voices are very loud, because sometimes in our lives, they do get loud. And for me, when they're very loud, they're a sign that something else is going on, usually that I'm tired. If I'm tired, I'm not resourced. If I'm not resourced, I can't show up confidently. And then all the things that play out that undermine start to play out. So become more aware for yourself. If they're showing up at particular times, what are they? And also something that's also quite interesting is, who is the voice? Is it yours or is it somebody else's? If it's somebody else's, who is that voice? Because something else that happens in some of these conversations that I have is that we identify the voice as somebody that was a teacher at school when you were 11. And somehow they said one thing to you and you're still carrying it to this day. It's no longer a value. And we'll talk about messaging and scripts maybe in another session. So think about who is that voice? Is it useful? And if it's not useful, can I let go of it? It's not even my voice. So why am I? Go away. So again, be curious, be self-aware, and be kind to yourself. You know, we can talk about this and you can go to meetings, you can gear yourself up and it didn't happen. We don't take out the big stick. We just think, okay, not today, but next time. Next time will be the time that I will. And we talked last week about prepare some questions that you might ask. If you're somebody who's quite shy, prepare some things that you can talk about with somebody. I'm always curious about what people have, earrings or what they've got. Find something that you can connect with. This is all it's about relating and connecting. That's all this is about. And it sometimes gets lost in the complexity of this whole idea of meetings and making a good impression. All we're trying to do is to connect and relate as human beings and to create from those processes, to co-create from those processes. So I hope you found today's session useful. So in terms of recap, it is trying to encourage you to begin that process of being more visible and being more vocal. And if you're somebody who is a woman, you're Black, you're Asian, where there's not many of us in a room, it's incumbent on us then to actually maybe be heard even more. When we think we're not quite the same as everybody else, I would say that's the time to kind of find it and to actually make sure that we are seeing that we're heard, because we need to be more and more, because what you have to say and what I have to say and what everybody else has to say in these spaces is really, really important. And just one last thing I wanted to add actually very quickly before we finish is that we're in all of this work, I was thinking about this the other day, we're always thinking about how, and this is a big part of my work, how I as the individual can make a difference for myself. But for all of you facilitators and managers running meetings, there's something that you can do to make sure that people feel included enough and belonging enough to be able to say what they have to say. And don't do that clumsy thing where you just suddenly point at somebody and say, Patricia, we haven't heard from you, because it's happened to me a few times. And if you want to scare somebody into complete silence, do that. We don't do that. There are other ways that as a facilitator, I'm probably appreciative converted, but I'm saying it because as a facilitator did to me fairly recently. There are other ways to include everybody in a conversation without pointing or pulling somebody up in particular. And if you have somebody in a meeting who is very vociferous and is very emollient and is a big extrovert and take up lots of space and lots of energy and they're full of vim and they've got loads of ideas, we don't want to temper them. We don't want to close that down. We just want to kind of turn their volume down a bit so we can crank up the volume of the ones that maybe are not quite so vocal. So it's in the same way, skillfully, how do you turn down the volume without dampening that person's enthusiasm and their vim? Because it's a beautiful thing. How do we turn it down so that we can then encourage the turning up of the volume of the people that are less able to be as vigorous and as visible and as vocal as perhaps that they naturally want to be? Because from your perspective as a manager or facilitator, that again could be the critical thing that we all need to hear that will transform our particular situation or our current conversation. So that's it for today. In terms of recapping, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and part of that journey is learning to manage our minds. And part of that journey of managing the mind is creating a self-awareness about what our mind is doing, what it's saying, and how that manifests for us in our behaviors. So self-awareness always is the key. I hope you found that helpful today. As ever, leave your comments and your questions and anything else you want to under this video. There are free resources available for you to use to help you on your career progression journey and also your well-being journey. And you can find them under this video and the other videos on this page, or you can go across to my website at www.patricia, Patricia, Ezechie, EZECHIE.com / and if you hover on the My Services button, you will see there's a free challenge your thinking or change your thinking, transform your career course. There's a free Rebalance You reset course that will help you with your well-being to kind of, if you're feeling a little bit overstressed, a little bit borderline burnout, help you to get back on balance, as well as the career assessment quiz, which will help you with a personalized action plan to start you on your journey towards figuring out what you need to figure out at whatever point in your career that you're in. So there's, depending on what your assessment scores are, you will get a personalized action plan. So there's plenty there for you to get started with. And of course, I'm here. So use me. I'm here. Send me your questions. And if I can help, which more often than not I can, I will. And if I can't, I absolutely know somebody that can. So I'll point you in the right direction. That is it for today's Watershed Wednesday. I hope you find it of value. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. And in the meantime, take the very best care of yourselves. And remember, I want to try and speak up this week. I want you to come back to me. I was seen and I was heard and I didn't die. It was okay. Well, I was seen and it was heard. Didn't go according to plan, but I'm okay. We'll be okay. But we've got to have a go. You've got to have a go. So start. And you've got someone here, me, who will support you no matter what comes back as a result of that experience. That's it for today. I will see you all again next week when we will either continue with this conversation on this topic, or if something else I think will be more useful that came up during the week comes up, we'll carry on there. And of course, if you have anything that you want me to talk about or you want support on, that you want to challenge on or you want some insight on, put your comments under this video and I'll be happy to take your topic suggestions as well. So until then, take the very best care of yourselves as ever, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye for now.